What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Patros podcast, where we are embracing healthy masculinity. This is a ministry of Man Up. My name is Allan. This is Jeff.
And we are also embracing
the
OHIO national champion, Ohio State Buckeyes.
But I still celebrate with you.
And most people are like, oh, I hate the Buckeyes. You guys suck. Yeah. And I'm going to be like, no, we don't. We're national champions. It's literally the one time where I could say we're the best. And it's actually true.
And who's we?
Well, we. I got a buddy of mine who's always talking about, oh, we won this, or yeah, we did it. And it's like, we in air quotes.
You had a part of it.
Like I did anything for it. Bro, I cheered.
Yeah.
I didn't break tradition. I turned my phone off like I always do.
Yeah.
I watched it in silence.
You prayed.
I prayed.
You played a role.
I played a role.
You prayed. No, it was so I saw this video that Emeka posted. I think Cam posted it too, and it was how it started and how it's going.
Yeah.
And so they actually posted the event that we went to, the revival event.
Yeah.
And so they posted that of, I think it was him, G, and Cam, and everybody, just them, speaking on stage, praying together. And so that was how it started. And then how it's going, obviously, they had the championship and everything like that.
So good.
Yeah.
And if you're just joining us or just stumbling onto the Patros podcast, the reason that we're talking about, yes, I'm an Ohio State fan. I'm a homer. I get it.
Yeah.
But
we embrace everybody of all colleges.
We also did a big project with several of the Buckeyes who, played in last week's championship game and who are on the field. And, folks, Travion Henderson, Emeka Abuka, G. Scott.
You've seen them talk about Jesus on TV at some point or on your phone.
Yeah, so if you follow it at all in your feed, you're seeing the guys that we did this project with. And so you can actually go to patros.us, sign up for a free account. We've got I think it's a 9-week curriculum there called the Counter Kingdom. What does it mean to be a man living in a counter kingdom, i.e., in contrast to the world?
Yeah.
And so these guys, just chopped it up for a weekend. We put it in a study for your small group, your church study, business group, or whatever. So go check it out.
You also have some videos that you can watch on our YouTube channel that have Trey, Emeka, and I think Master, right?
And we've got the full uncut
full-length ones
versions
as
well there. So anyway, that's why, it's tough because even though I got a lot of fans or a lot of folks who are not Ohio State fans.
We even got a Notre Dame person on staff.
I know. He had to.
I had to twist that knife just a little bit.
He lost a bet. He had to go beardless.
Oh, do you guys did that?
Oh, no, he did. I didn't. I could keep my beard. He had to shave his, though.
That's awesome.
In 3-degree weather. He's like, man, I lost all my insulation. Tim, you're a good sport. But so really cool today. We're bringing on a guest who is really close to the Man Up organization, to me personally. Judge Aaron Hubbard. So welcome to the Patros podcast.
Welcome.
Good afternoon.
Also, I feel like we have to have people cheering.
Yeah. And he just happens to be an Ohio State fan, too.
Oh, this wasn't coordinated at all,
So,
Jeff.
like, the fact that I have on Ohio State, it's, I'm not trolling anybody. I'm just a fan. That's
Jeff
all.
has Ohio State underwear, socks, everything.
The funny thing is, no, I did not go to Ohio State. A proud alum of Wheaton College in Wheaton, Illinois. And I grew up an Ohio State fan because my dad grew up in Bellevue, Ohio, and he just was always
the torch to you.
He's always a Buckeye, so he was a Patros, passing down his wisdom to the next generation, and is stuck.
He'd be proud.
Yes, he would be. He would love all of this. He'd just be eating it up. But we're right in tail end of a series we've been doing for National Mentoring Month, and if you're stumbling on the Patros podcast, Patros is Greek for father, and we talk about what does it mean to be a father or a father figure. Paul in 1 Corinthians 4:15, he says to the Corinthians that you guys had many teachers, but you didn't have many Patros. You didn't have many fathers. And his whole point is, I'm going to be that father figure to you. Like, I'm going to be that source of wisdom, that kind of guiding light, that guy that you can look to when everything is going down and you're like, man, I just need a constant in the storm, right? I need that beacon of hope, beacon of light. I think that's what God calls us to, and to be that first and foremost for our families. But then what does that mean to be that in the culture? And so we are happy to have on the honorable Judge Aaron Hubbard, and also a Man Up board member. And so we're just really grateful to have you. So, Aaron, tell us a little about yourself, man. Who's Aaron Hubbard?
All right. So another Ohio State fan.
Let's go.
So, funny you say that because everybody, when they hear you're Ohio State, I have stuff in my office, and everybody's always like, "Did you go there?" And no, I didn't. But I grew up right outside of Columbus, about 30 minutes outside of Columbus.
I think that's what people don't understand is like you don't have to. Yeah. If you've got roots there.
Yeah, I mean, I always explain our other sports teams have never really, you got the Browns, you got the Bengals. I mean, none of the other football teams have been as winning as Ohio State. So, but I grew up there and grew up an Ohio State fan. So that's we share that bond. But no, I've been down here in Florida since 2007. After I graduated law school, came down here and started working as a prosecutor for the state over in Hillsborough County, and I was over there from around 2007 till 2022. So I was a prosecutor for 15 years. So I've been in the courtroom. I've prosecuted, cases. I've seen, dads get separated from their kids.
Wow.
I've handled, cases of child abuse and other things. And so I've been kind of front lines seeing the effect of fatherhood and the lack of fathers and fatherlessness in the criminal justice system for those 15 years. And then in 2022, actually right around the time that Man Up got on board with the legislation with Governor DeSantis, I got appointed by Governor DeSantis to be a judge here in Pinellas County, and I've been on the bench since 2022. And in the capacity there, now I'm handling family law situations, domestic violence, things of that nature, restraining orders, and other cases. So again, now I'm in a different position in our system, but still kind of on the front line seeing this issue every day of fatherlessness, dads that some are fighting for their kids and some are not for different reasons, but I get to see it every day, and I definitely see the effects and definitely have the experience to help, and hopefully, and as being a Man Up board member, obviously, it's always been on my heart to help, because I see just a lot of kids that come through without dads, and maybe if dad was in their life or had the support or had the ability to be in their life, things might have been different, might have went a different path.
Yeah, and one of the reasons we're doing this series is so that other states can see, what Florida has done to tackle the fatherless issue. They passed HB 7065 in the House back in 21. They're pouring $70 million into fatherhood initiatives now, year over year. And so what the state has said is, hey, we need some help. Like, we recognize that, you talked about being a prosecutor, right? That when you go into our prisons right now, 85%, first of all, it's almost exclusively male. And then 85% of those did not have a dad growing up. And then you look at all the other, statistics when it comes to, behavior disorders, when it comes to homelessness, when it comes to teen pregnancy, when it comes to dropout rates, mental disorders, all of them can be traced back. I mean, almost always, if a kid's got a behavior disorder, like my first question is immediately, does he have dad in the home? And that doesn't mean that all of them are true. It's just at some point you look at it and it's not just correlation. There's actually a causation there where you actually have the absence of a father is the root cause at issue with this kid. So I'm excited to hear about your story and to help the listeners to kind of peel back, why another state, for instance, would want to do this if people are tuning in from around the country, why they would want to advocate for something like this with the legislature. And maybe you start there, because that'd be an interesting thing, because I hear all the time from Christians and church people like, well, we don't want to intertwine the state and the church, we don't want to have the church. Yeah, we've got to keep those apart or whatever. Or you hear on kind of from a more, Democratic side or liberal side to say, well, we don't want the church involved with the state, and you got the other side going, well, I don't want to be involved with the state either. In your opinion, what's the benefit of having church and state work together on an issue big like this, like fatherlessness?
Like collaborate.
Yeah. So I think the word that always comes to mind is support. Because that's one of the things that I've heard time and time and time, thousands of times, all these cases and issues, and it's a lack of support, and that's really kind of simple. Like, how can, I mean, anybody could do this. It doesn't have to be a church, but it just so happens that, the church is compassionate and has a heart for this and wants to be involved. But just, setting the religion part of it aside and those views, I mean, it's just support. I mean, I've heard from so many dads that they just don't have the support to provide for their kid, or they don't have the support to, have a place where their kid can come and stay on the weekend, a safe place, or, whether it's just a financial support. So I think you just find in the church, you find a lot more compassion, and you find people that have a heart to come along, just like we go out and, feed the homeless, or we provide different things like that. It's just simply coming alongside a dad who's struggling, and who may be on the verge of losing their child, or may not be involved and wants to find ways to be involved. It's just coming alongside of them and trying to give them that support to make them a better father, to make them have the tools that they can have to be in their child's life.
Yeah, that's good. When your time as a prosecutor, you are seeing presumably
every situation.
Every situation, and I think probably the worst. Sometimes of that situation. One of the things that we have talked a lot about in this series is making sure that kind of those of us who have it together, quote unquote, I think sometimes we can be quick to judge these folks, and a lot of times there's good reason, right? You've got some dirtbag situations, but at the end of the day, if as Christians we believe everybody has inherent value, that means even the dirtbag has got inherent value. Mm-hmm. In your time as a prosecutor, how did you balance that as a someone who obviously believes that everybody has an intrinsic value, but also need to make sure that justice is applied? And how'd you?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was always a struggle of mine. Because as a Christian, as being sympathetic to grace, people making mistakes and being forgiven and, receiving God's forgiveness in my own life, I always struggled with that as a prosecutor, because I didn't want to be this, I'm better and I'm holier than thou, kind of approach. But, obviously there's always consequence. So you first look at the punishment side of things. There has to be consequences when people commit crime. So there has to be that. But I guess one thing, and it was actually at I think it was a breakfast for one of the Man Up and Go events. And I met, I think it's Jack Brewer.
Oh, yeah.
That has helped. And him and I talked afterward about me being a prosecutor and stuff. One thing he said always stuck with me is he said, look, just because a dad goes to prison, just because he, did something bad, it doesn't erase him being a father. He's still a father. And obviously there are situations where dads are abusing kids, physically, sexually, which those are a different, animal and struggle, and how do you deal with those? But the majority of cases where guys are in prison, or in our jails, they're still a dad, and there's still got to be a way for them to, kind of get across to the kids, that you still have a dad, you still, he's still there, and there still needs to be that support and some type of contact. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a constant struggle, but again, I think there's a lot of ways that the church or just anybody or like an organization like Man Up can help in trying to build that bridge. So even if a child's separated from their dad, they still know who their father is. They still have some communication. So
when you had dads as a prosecutor come in, I'm just curious, what were the things that you saw? What were the struggles? Did you notice any trends? Did you see, man, a lot of these guys didn't have dads themselves? I'm just curious, what were some of those things you saw?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say 95% of the I'll call them criminal, the people that are defendants that are charged with crimes, a huge majority of them don't have fathers. I rarely had cases where, there was a mom and a dad involved. I mean, there was a few, but they were, few and far between. Majority of them, I would hear the story time and time again. They didn't have a father. They were raised by their grandmother. Grandma was struggling to provide, all those kind of stories. And so, I always look at those cases and wonder, like, would it have been different, had they had resources like what Man Up's providing or what these other, people are providing. I wonder, if things would be different. But there's definitely was that trend, and the statistics don't lie about, the majority of men in prison, are without fathers. They never knew their father. Yeah. So
has your perspective changed or matured in different ways from being a prosecutor to being a judge?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you as a judge, you have to be down that, right down the middle. You're calling balls and strikes. You're neutral. You can't be,
you can't
be geared towards one side or the other. As a prosecutor, you're fighting on behalf of, the people in the community. You're fighting on behalf of victims. So yeah, it's definitely when you kind of get back towards the middle, you definitely start to see more. When I was a young prosecutor, it was like, lock everybody up, throw away the key, punish.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, everybody needs the maximum penalty in this. And then, as you now become a judge and you kind of are in that seat, the judgment seat now, like sometimes having to determine how long somebody serves or something, you definitely, I guess call it compassion, but I think you see both sides a lot better. And so it opens your eyes to kind of weigh all those things and take some of those things into consideration. Like, he never had a father and, there was nobody around to tell him right from wrong. And kind of, when it's a single mother or a grandmother trying to raise kids, I mean, that's tough. I mean, kids don't have that same respect, as a father that's there,
Yeah.
So
that's I'm curious, like how much leeway you had. I mean, I think this is an interesting topic because you have the law. The law is quote unquote black and white, right? Like it's down there. But the reason it's not black and white is because it has to be interpreted.
Exactly.
You've got like opinions, and you got a prosecutor saying one thing. You've got a defendant saying another thing, and the defense attorney saying another thing. And then to your point, you've got to like kind of walk that line. Where is your leeway in interpretation? How much can you get away with? Or
so it depends. I mean, in crime and in those courtrooms, there's a lot of Florida has a lot of minimum mandatory sentences on gun charges and other charges where the court doesn't have much discretion. So if the parties, if the state and the defense don't work something out and it goes to trial, your hands are tied. And there's a lot of sentencing enhancements. What I mainly deal with in the family law situation, there's a lot of discretion. There's a lot of, when it's a situation
case by case
of time sharing or, coming up with a parenting plan, there's a lot of discretion there for the court to take all these factors in, looking at what's in the best interest of the child, and then trying to come up with a plan.
Yeah.
So,
are you handling adoptions as well? Like
no, I don't. No, I don't handle any of those.
Okay. So anything with fostering and stuff like that, that's all?
No, the majority of the cases that we see are, stem from some type of domestic violence situation where somebody needs an order of protection.
Gotcha.
But then if there's children in common, you've got to work in whether that party that's not allowed to have contact will, can they at least have contact with the children and still
who's in charge of that handoff?
Supervised, unsupervised. There's a lot of different factors. So there's a lot more discretion there.
And you also deal with, you said, I know we were talking previously, you said you deal a lot with neighborly discord.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, some of our injunction statutes allow for situations where anybody kind of qualifies as a party. So yeah, we get a lot of neighbor upset with neighbors about the color of their fence, or
there's a tree coming over.
Yeah, trees. Yeah, that's a big. It's usually a fence line. Fence lines cause a lot of problems. So I always tell people,
do those go a lot faster? Like those cases?
Yeah, those cases resolve a lot quicker, and it's a lot less stress for us when you're not dealing with kids and trying to make a decision on, how much time the kid's going to spend with their parent.
For sure.
So they're sometimes can be entertaining, but they're definitely a lot less stressed too.
Let's say like heavy is the crown for the guy who's got to make the decision on
somebody
if a
else's
kid.
mom. Oh yeah.
No, if a kid goes here or there, right? Like,
For sure.
or like this. If I've got a DV situation, man, like to Jack's point, the kid doesn't cease to be the kid's son or daughter.
Mm-hmm.
But you're like, man, I also want to keep you safe. That's a heavy burden.
Well,
Yeah, and there's the discretion is there. But like Florida, the law just changed to where now, like, if the father's on the birth certificate, there's a presumption. It's 50-50.
Yeah, that's right.
So there is, some presumptions and some starting points.
Okay.
But yeah, you're always worried about, you're always trying to make the best decision with the information you're provided.
Talk about that, because if you can keep your thought.
Oh, yeah, you're fine.
Because
I'll
the
pin it.
50-50 thing was an important deal that I know that was lobbied and legislated, because the idea is the presumption was not 50-50, right? The presumption almost always favors the mom. And we realize why that is the case, because dads usually are the ones that's why we have a fatherless issue, right?
Yeah.
So we understand it, but it put dads at a disadvantage who were actually trying to do the right thing, and kind of got caught up in what I think was an unfair law to dads.
Yeah, so the dads faced a much more of an uphill battle because there was no presumption. But now that law is passed, at least it's kind of a starting point for dad. So as long as he's on the birth certificate, because it's another thing you and I have talked about before, and one thing I often tell people, when you're in a situation where there are no court orders, and one party, either mom or dad, decides that the other party's not going to see the child, there's really not much you can do without a court order. If you call law enforcement, they have nothing. They can't just go on somebody's word. So that was kind of a struggle back when there wasn't this presumption in the birth certificate issue. Like, dads had to, fight to first establish, paternity, and then it was an uphill battle. So at least it's kind of a starting point, and it's also, it's good sometimes to tell people or be able to tell a mom, look, there's this legal presumption that it's 50-50, because oftentimes they come into court and they say, I don't want him to have any contact, and then when we dig a little deeper, it turns out, there's no physical abuse, there's no neglect, maybe he's, got other issues or something, but, so it's nice for us to be able, and it helps the fathers, to say, look, there's this presumption, like here's a starting point, so I think it gives them a little bit of hope versus telling them, look, you got nothing, and now it's all an uphill battle from here. At least it's kind of a starting point.
Well, that's one of the things that we, sometimes I think, in the outside looking in, we tend to think that, if a kid is, if the kid is like kind of dirty and in raggedy clothes, and mom is smoking, that it means she's a bad mom, and they're in a trailer, and you get all the stereotypes, right? It's in the same way that would be unfair to assume that she's a bad mom. Yeah, maybe she could make better choices. We can maybe agree on that. But at the end of the day, like, for a while, there was a quickness, at least in our area, and I think this was reactionary to remove kids, because when the sheriff's office used to take the kids out, sheriffs are there to protect, and so they're like, hey, this is not a good environment for this kid. I'm going to take this kid out. Maybe it's not a good environment, but does it really mean that the kid is unsafe? And at what point are we going to restrict or take away the rights of parents to be parents based on lifestyle choices that they make, right? Like, if someone chooses to eat, McDonald's every night, it's probably not great for anybody.
Remove those. Yeah.
But
remove.
Yeah, we're going to remove the kid because mom's giving him chicken tenders. I just, at some point, we've got to let the parent be the parent. And I think the 50-50 law now kind of helps to take away some of that stigma from dad. You're forced to do that.
Yeah, because the term bad father or bad mother, like, it's a very broad, like you said, it's a broad.
It's how you interpret it.
And a lot of people like to throw that around, and we see it in court all the time. He's a bad dad. Well, tell me what he does. Well, he raises his voice. Okay.
You're
Well,
like,
my
also
dad,
guilty.
My dad
And what's
raised his
raising the voice
and,
to you?
And again, there's some detriment to kids. They shouldn't be exposed to that kind of screaming and yelling.
For sure.
And physical. It doesn't have to be just physical violence. Sometimes, but again, that term, everybody throws that around, and like you said, like, just having dirty clothes or not maybe, being on time. He was supposed to drop him off at 5 and he was late, or something, that's not. So we gotta, I think we need to get away from that term, and I try not to use it a lot in court, and I try to explain to people, like, let's get away from trying to define this. Let's look at the facts, and that's where the presumption helps. Let's start with this presumption 50-50, and then let's work it out and go from there. So
Well, and I think, when we talk about the need for fatherhood legislation, across the country, I don't think it's an overstatement to say it's an epidemic. And I mean, that's been our contention for a while now. It's why it's why you're on the board. It's why you're doing the work that you're doing. It's why we're doing the work we're doing. And so something needs to change. And I think the legislation brings an optic to it. And I think our prayers that other states will see this and follow it. Some of the things that are helpful are, and you brought it up and we've talked about it before, is, to establish paternity, that can be pretty expensive. It can be daunting. I mean, we talked to Judge Manning, he pulls into his garage and he's in his office in 20 seconds, but if you're a dad who's got to go to court, how many buses are you taking? How many Ubers do you need? Taking time off work, not getting paid, and then you going into the court and it's like, there's a ton of rooms here. Where do I go? Like, the whole process is intimidating.
Yeah. I hear a lot of dads that come in and say, it's not worth it. I'll try to explain to them, a paternity, and you can file this and it'll give you, rights to your child. And then that way, if mom doesn't allow you to see the child, you have something that can be enforced by the court. And I hear time and time again, it's just not worth it. They're never going to give me a fair shake. I can't afford it. I can't take time off of work. So that's why I always go back to this support thing. There's got to be, it's definitely an epidemic. Yeah. And there has to be some, and there's support, both sides of it. I mean, there's lots of support and things out there for moms and things that they can do. But I think we got the stigma, like you said before, has always been that, it's always the dad's fault, and, let's leave the child with mom and it'd be better for him to stay. But so it goes back to that. We got to make it, the access has to be there, and it's got to be organizations like Man Up or other people that are willing to step in and help try to navigate this process with these men. And because we got to give them a shot, right? If they're not even trying because they think that they're going to lose from the beginning, then, we got to give them a shot. And
we'll have that often where a kid is, you have a situation where at some point mom and dad have separated, and for whatever reason, there wasn't necessarily
always abuse or
violence
like that,
or anything. It could just be like, for whatever reason, dad is just like, okay, fine, I you don't want me in your life, fine, and that's sometimes that is the reaction that we as men have, is like, you don't want me, fine, you deal with it on your own.
We're like proving a point sometimes too, of like, let's see how you do without me then.
Sometimes it could be that, but we'll have the situations where then mom is living with, say, boyfriend or whatever, and there is a DV, such a domestic violence situation. And now that mom, the child is now taken away from bio mom and this, kind of live-in partner or whatever. And so now they're going back to the dad, or sometimes they don't even know there's a dad. But then sometimes you do have to determine paternity. You have to figure that out, and you'll have a situation where dad has got to take parenting classes, even though he may have a wife now and is parenting his kids just fine. But now he's got to do a parenting class to prove that he's a good parent to take on this other kid. So I think there are just some things within the structure of the law that make it difficult.
That make dad feel like the cards are stacked against me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you got organizations like Man Up. So this is why I'm a proponent of the fatherhood bill and a proponent of using dollars this way, is Man Up can come in and say, hey, let me coach you through this. I know Judge Hubbard and or I know Judge Manning or no Judge whatever, and they want to help you. They're there as they have to follow the law, but they're impartial to this. And if the best thing is that they see you trying and they see you doing your thing, they're going to be lenient. They're going to show you grace because there is a human element. And I think so many times we looked at it, our dads look at it and go, well, the deck is stacked against me. The system is full of a bunch of women. So how am I going to get a fair shake? And when we are insecure as men, we will often shut down. right? Like if I don't know what to do, it's like, me.
We flee or we fight.
Yeah, it happens all the time at home. Like something technological comes up with the TV. Could I figure it out? Yeah, probably. I'm like, hey, babe, like something's going on with it. I'm just being lazy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't want to have to like learn something new. She already knows it. So I sometimes think that mindset can come across with men too. It's like, man, I don't want to have to learn this new thing. I do want my kids, but I feel like such a man, I can't even navigate. How am I going to then do it with a kid? Like that seems incredibly difficult.
And they don't know. They're totally blind to what the legal process is going to be and how the court's going to work. And, if they don't even know that there's this presumption out there, like I hear people tell me about how daunting it is, but I can only imagine like not being in that world. Like obviously I've been in the court system since I was a brand new lawyer. But I can't imagine like trying to go through that and then deal with, your ego and what if they bring up this mistake I made and what if they, do this. It is daunting. And that's why I go back to this support thing. Like the more support that these men can have, it's only going to make things better. Because again, why not give them a shot? Like let them at least get in there and make their case and see where it goes.
Yeah, that's hard because you're almost asking them to navigate a world that is so foreign. It'd be like telling somebody like, hey, build a car in the next 6 months, no help. And if you don't do it the right way, you lose your kids. Like that's the level of like, I don't understand. Like, I don't even know where to start in building a car. Yeah. So I can't imagine how daunting it is for somebody to walk into a courtroom. And I've been to the family side. We adopted. And every time I'd go, I'd be like, which courtroom do I go to? And like where? So I can't imagine somebody that's just like, they don't have somebody to text and say like, hey, which one was it? Where am I supposed to go?
Well, it goes back to you keep talking about support. Yeah. And so many of our dads don't have that support system. Number one, they didn't have a dad themselves. Yeah. And number two, if the child is living with mom, it's natural that her side are always going to, they're always going to support her, no matter if it's auntie, grandma, whatever. And so it's like, even if you're doing a timeshare situation and, you get the look from auntie, or grandma going, you better watch it, because some of that toxicity can seep through to the rest of the family. So I think it's really good what we're doing. If you had to say, changes that you would like to see in the system or changes that you think would benefit not just dads but families, you're in family law. Yeah. Are there is anything
like ways to innovate the system?
Yeah, I mean, I always think of like we have victim advocates that come in situations like where there's domestic violence. I mean, they're always in our courtroom when we're having court most of the days. But like to watch like somebody like Allan, like you were saying, like how like nothing about this system, and then they come in and they see a judge up there in a black robe, and everything's very formal in court, or at least we try to keep it that way.
Yeah, it's not
so I mean that can be a little scary in and of itself, but to have an advocate, like I watch like some of our victim advocates, they'll go outside and talk with somebody and you can just see their countenance change and they're more calm, they're less nervous. And so I mean I think that's something that we need to work on is having something like that, like available to fathers or in these situations that can kind of, like you said, talk to them and just kind of put them at ease a little bit and help them. Because then I think if you kind of take away some of those scary things and the scary parts and calm them down, they're going to be more engaged and they're going to be more willing to work and, and listen. Because like for me to explain it up there in my robe and like, I'm this judge and they think all I want to do is take their kids away. Like for them to understand that, that they're going to get equal access, that they're going to be treated fairly, to hear that from somebody else, might cause them to actually want to engage more than just, me demanding something or ordering something. So we just got to figure out a way to support these guys and to help provide services. I mean, this is an area where like, we get into this debate about more government, less government and stuff. Yeah. But at the end of the day, if we're requiring these people to have some type of court order, which, dictates the custody, the government would have to be involved. So the fact that Florida's getting involved in this and not shying away from it is really cool. And it would be awesome to see this in more states because, they've got to help. I mean, they've got to help provide services. And when they do, I see families, even on sides where it's, people are scared of DCF.
Yeah.
But I hear stories once in a while where people say, look, I'm glad DCF got involved because they hooked me up with services and they put me in contact with this organization. And, I now have diapers and I've got food and, so. Yeah,
it's not all bad.
Yeah.
No, but it feels
that's
bad.
what I think people, like you said earlier, like everybody separate, there's separation of church and state and everybody's like the church should stay out of it. But the church and the compassion and the access to things and, food pantries and
the nonprofits that are, many of them
faith-based.
Are faith-based.
Yeah.
Right?
So why are we,
why
are we scared of that? Like we need to get those people involved and see what happens.
Yeah.
How, so does the fatherhood bill directly like impact your section of judicial responsibilities? Like, whereas like dependency court might align more with the fatherhood bill, or I have two questions, I guess, that one, and then from the people that are going in front of you, how often are they maybe even having to be handed off to DCF if there's like, a recurring DV situation?
So the first question, I mean, it doesn't directly impact us as it does like dependency where they have the fatherhood engagement and the coaches and stuff. But I mean, I always, Jeff and I have talked about this, like every courtroom, well, other than dependency sometimes because there's minors involved and stuff.
For sure.
But for most part, our courtrooms are public. I mean, they're open to the public. So.
And judges also, you guys can be watching it and like watching in on certain cases and stuff too.
But
right?
I mean, anybody can come in. I mean, so
True.
a dad can come in and bring somebody that's there to, say, hey, I'm supporting them and helping them or I have the support of this organization and things like that. So there's really nothing that prevents people from getting involved in that aspect of it. And what was the other question?
The other one was like how often, or maybe not at all, but does a situation, like if a DV case consistently comes to you and it's like both kids, I mean both parties are involved, they're making a dangerous environment for the child, how often does that even maybe get transitioned into dependency case? Like, do you have to hand that off?
I mean, we're all mandatory reporters, so the minute that I read anything about allegations of abuse or neglect, or even kids that are present while violence is occurring between mom and dad, it has to be reported to DCF, so they get involved and start their investigation and stuff. So a lot of ours spills over to that. It may not reach dependency if the state's not trying to remove somebody. But the one cool thing that they've also done in the law is we try to keep, we call it one family, one judge. So we try to keep all these matters together so that people are in front of the same judge.
Familiar with that
judge is more familiar. So if there's a dependency and there's also an injunction or there's a divorce or something going on, the spirit of it is that one judge handles that, so they're familiar with the family, and also to prevent from people having to repeat different things and go to different courtrooms. So
you bring up, that's a great point, because I think one of the biggest frustrations we hear in dependency, and for those listening, you don't know what dependency. When we say dependency, we are just talking about those kids who have come into quote unquote the system of care.
Foster care.
So that would be foster care, or it could be a relative that is caring for the child, or
a group
caregiver, or a group home, any of those situations. But in other words, a kid has been removed from their normal situation,
their biological family,
due to abuse, abandonment, or neglect, and so they're now in dependency. But one of the big things that people struggle with is this like constant shuffling. It's a revolving door of caseworkers.
Yeah.
And so then they have to oftentimes tell the next caseworker
the same
thing. And then a new caseworker comes. And meanwhile, I mean, you've got situation. I mean, we've got someone on our staff who is just now getting permanency after 7 years. Mm-hmm. In the law in the state of Florida, statute is a year. Like, you're supposed to achieve permanency in a year. and it's taken 7.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things that I would like to see changed
Mm-hmm.
is I'd like to see a little more enforcement
Mm-hmm.
on, and I get it. I am all about that biological parent. I think that
Mm-hmm.
all the studies and research shows, and I just think about it myself. Would I
Mm-hmm. rather
rather be with my kind of messed up dad or this like dad who's too good to be true? I'm gonna probably choose messed up dad because he's my dad, you know. But I do think we need to promote policies that can speed along permanency, because the more time a kid spends in the quote unquote system, the more detrimental it is to his or her, you know, behavior. So I'd like to see that. And this idea of continuity I love, because you get really frustrated when you're having to explain it all the time. And I mean, I've got pastor friends who are foster parents, and they come to me like, man, I'm so frustrated. They say stuff to me they wouldn't say on their social media or from the pulpit, right? Because we're close, but they're expressing frustration over the system, because it's like, do these people know, like A doesn't talk to B, and like no one, you know. So I think that those are some things we could do to help.
Yeah, and there's the timing aspect of it. That's always a struggle, because like one thing that really opened my eyes when I went from, you know, when you're a prosecutor or you're in criminal division, you've got a clerk, and the clerk's controlling the cases, and the judge is setting court dates every court date. When you get into family law dependency, I don't know about dependency, but in family law, like I tell people, you know, you have to stay on top of this. Like, you have to call and get a court date. Like, nobody's going to force you. If you just let your case sit out there and linger, nobody's going to call you and ask. You know, eventually the judge is going to, you know, file a motion for what we call lack of prosecution. Like, there's no movement on the case, but like, that's one thing people don't know. And again, back to the education side and trying to navigate it. But that's always a common complaint that we hear is, and that's another drawback for dads. So yeah, I mean, if something could be done on that side, because a lot of times, you know, dads, they say that too, like, you know, it's going to be years or it's going to be months before I get an order. And then what do you do in the meantime? Like, when a dad or a mom, or even mom, tells me, I haven't seen my kid in weeks and there's no orders in place, so there's nothing anybody can do. You know, so yeah, that's definitely something that could be fixed, and I don't know.
Which I sympathize with the system, and both judicial and dependency, like foster care and everything like that, because even when I was in court, like for our kids when we were fostering them at that point, we talked to our attorney, the state attorney that's appointed to them, and she told us, she was like, guys, I have 80 families that I'm working on right now that, like, I've had your kids for their entire time. So it was like at that point 2 years. But I have 80 families. And when we're talking about 80 families, we're talking about some of these families have 6 kids in the system, and each of those kids are in different homes. So like, it's not this simple, like, I have 80 families and all those siblings are together. We're talking about, you know, so it's really messy. And so I can see from the the foster family side, the biological family side, and judicial, everything like that, that it's just the fact that this is broken. Like, and it's broken because God didn't intend for any of this to even come to this point. And so it's almost like, it's not impossible. Like, I think that we can get somewhere, but I think often we're not sympathetic to the fact that, like, the judicial system's trying their best, and the foster care system could probably do better, but it's hard. It's not easy.
And I would argue, are they trying their best?
I think when you're dealing with a full-blown system, you can't say that the full system's trying its best, because some people maybe aren't, but some people are. And so I'm not saying that the whole system's trying its best, but I'm not going to pin on the judge that's overseeing my case that the policies that they have to abide by, right? So like, I've talked to parents that they're waiting 7 years and they're frustrated, but then the judge explains to them, hey, if I do go too fast, the parents can come back and appeal. And so you'll have little Johnny, you'll be his adopted parents, that's great. But dad comes back around in 5 years and says, hey, guess what, judge, you missed this, this, and this, and you didn't do your job correctly, and now all these policies, I get to take Johnny back.
Well, and I would agree with that, and I would say
Yeah.
that's kind of what I'm getting at, that the policies that are in place that would
Yeah.
cause an elongation like that, to me, need to be re-examined, reevaluated.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah, there needs to be more access to from other groups. Like that's the other thing. I think the court system is so well. One negative is everybody wants to do it the way it's always been done.
There's we want it to be standardized.
We're always opposed to change. But to go back to the original thing we talked about with the church, like why keep the church out of this? Because what other group of people
in the
out
community
there, like have the compassion, have the resources, have, because again, you've got to have people that have a heart for this, because it's a tough subject. Like you're dealing with abuse, you're dealing with, kids without a parent. Like these kids are already, mentally, they're already, languishing, and so it's a tough subject, and so why not? I mean, the church is compassionate, and it takes me back to, like I said, I think as a court, like even as a judge, you're always like, am I doing the right thing? Like, should I let this organization help out? Should I let this person come up and talk on this person's behalf? And and some other person might say, well, we've never done that before, so I wouldn't start it now. And so we have to be open to the resources that are out there, and groups like Man Up and Go in the church that are willing to step in and say, hey, like let us coach this guy. Let us come in and tell you, once a month, what he's been doing to better himself and things like that.
Well, even as you were just talking earlier, I was thinking, man, and we don't have this. We've got father engagement specialists that are in dependency courtrooms. We have our preservation specialists who will appear in court, right, as an advocate. But it would be interesting to have a father advocate who was, employed by us, but literally his office was in the courtroom, and all the judges knew it. So that when you have these cases come up, you're just kind of like, hey, where's the man up guy who can help establish paternity? Let's get him in here and then, because then those resources come. And a lot of times the dads are still, we have this problem where the dads are like, no, I don't need any help. I'm good. If you stay on them, though, they tend to come around, is what we've seen.
What they need to do is, and maybe this is something down the road, but they need to look at the treatment courts, their model, like drug treatment court. I was just down in Sarasota observing they have a DUI like treatment court. And so in the treatment model for those court systems, it's all case managers and case management, kind of like dependency a little bit. But yeah, I mean, they literally have people go around, all right, tell me how John's doing, he's going to his classes, he's testing negative, and the court trusts those people because they know them, and they know the providers because they put it together.
They're all vetted.
And so, it's something maybe, like that could be, because again, it doesn't have to get, we don't need to let it get to the dependency court. If we could stop it before it gets there, then we're doing a good job. So why not try to come up with some model like that where we can keep this father from getting to the point where, somebody wants to take his rights away.
Yeah.
I like that for family court. It feels like that makes a lot of sense. We're up against the clock here, Judge Hubbard, but I know that you had a personal battle, and you don't have to share what you don't want to share, but I know you dealt with just having to kind of getting it personal. You had to be a man and be a father, and yet you're dealing with some medical stuff. Can you just share a little bit? I mean, you don't have to share whatever you don't want to, but what was that process like? And just in terms of being a man, being a father, how did God grow you and all of that?
Yeah. So I went through, about a year. It's almost a year and a half now. I had cancer in my throat, and so I went through chemotherapy and radiation, and both of those make you really sick. So yeah, I mean, it definitely, in terms of this and being a father, like I've looked back so many times that just like I was just physically unable to be there for them at times. And I guess going through it, obviously if I wouldn't have my wife there to take care of them, and then the church came alongside us, gift cards, meals, things like that, because she was running them to school, to sports, to practices, to games, to all this stuff. And it was like, yeah, looking back, I guess I haven't really thought about it until now, but like looking back on that, like, yeah, I had other people, my parents and things like that, but in these situations, like where people just aren't sick, they don't have the finances or they don't have a place to stay. Like I can't imagine. And I've talked to people in the church. Like I don't know that we would have come out,
without your
where we
community.
were without having the church there to support us, with the meals and the things like that. But, and then it was like about a year after all this, and a couple of the kids, I have 4, and so a couple of them, like their grades, like it was noticeable, it went down, and I'm like getting on them. I'm like checking there. I'm like, well, what do you mean you this and that? And finally, my wife's like, look, like we just went through a pretty rough,
Season.
6
Pretty rough
months.
stretch,
Like it affected the kids, and I didn't realize that going through it.
Wow.
And that really, like, I was like, wow. You see just the effects of having, dad just being sick and not being able to do all the normal things that I'm used to doing with them. But God was great, and, the church was there, and I was able, in my position, obviously, I had a lot of support there. So didn't really miss out much, had people to help cover. But it was tough. But I think, hopefully the kids now, they'll make comments once in a while, like, my dad went through cancer. And and mine wasn't even, the outcome for mine was
aggressive?
good. Like, no, it was, mine was very treatable, and I was told from the get-go, it's very treatable and
That's good.
and everything. So I feel bad, like even compared to some other things that people go through. But yeah, having a dad matters, having a father matters. And I try to tell that to people when I see them in court all the time, like, you're arguing, you're yelling, you're screaming, even if it's not physical, like these kids are just soaking that in. They're a sponge, and I tell these people all the time, like, your kid's going to talk like you talk. So if you're talking to mom like that, if mom's talking to dad like that, if you're telling your kid constantly that dad's a deadbeat and that he's not a good dad, like your kid's going to remember that, and that's going to affect him, so there's definitely, like you said, it's definitely an epidemic out there, and everyone can do more in this situation. So
there's something powerful of, like, because so throughout this series, we've talked to just about like some of the fathers and how they struggle to open up for help. And I think it's one thing when you're talking about people that are not able to pay the bills, or, they come from poverty, and so they're check to check and this, that, and the third. They don't want to take handouts. But for you as I believe, an established man with a career, right, to still in that moment of need be humble enough to receive help, not necessarily a handout, but in a sense, you looked at your community and said, I need to lean on you. Looking at your wife and allowing her to shoulder some of that with you, that's so powerful. Like, because I think so many men are scared to do that, regardless of their demographic. But I think so many men are scared to just say, you know what, like, God, you've given me all of these things, but this season I need to lean on those around me.
Yeah, and that's again, I go back to like what I said in the beginning, the support. And that's what attracted me to Man Up and Go from the beginning, like what you were doing as an organization to help, because you need that. Like, I had people constantly texting me, asking, how are you doing? I'm praying for you, those kind of things. And it was like, those are the little things that you're like, I've got people I can lean on. I've got people to support me if I need it. And that's what I loved about Man Up. And then, like, when that whole fatherhood initiative, to see our governor and to see the legislature and some of those guys that were involved get behind it and say, look, really like we care and we want to be part of this. It's because without it, it's, it's nothing. Like, we'll just keep doing the same thing over and over. Yeah.
It was bold for them to your point about change, say, hey, we need a change and we're going to do something about it. And to be a part of it for us is obviously, like, just thrilling, because in seeing state and church lock arms in some degree. There's obviously a degree of separation there, but there is a, hey, we need help.
Yeah.
And we're not afraid to go to the folks who are on the ground and can get it done. So, man, Judge Hubbard, I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for sharing your story. I mean, you look great, by the way.
Yeah, I'm doing great now.
I had lunch with him maybe 6 months ago or whatever, and you were about as skinny as this.
Yeah, I lost a lot of weight. Which I wanted to lose weight, but not that way. But it was good. But I feel better.
It's no Ozempic.
So he looks really good. You look really good right now.
I've got to meet a couple other people that have close friend that went through the same thing right after me. So God really has used that situation to help me,
amen,
come along and support other people. So
awesome. Well, thanks for being on the show, brother.
Yeah, thank you
so much. And thank you guys for joining us on this episode of the Patros Podcast, and we'll see you guys on the next one.